Okay, today we are going to make a melee system. So it's going to be both a melee procedural animation and then a lunge whenever your reticle turns red when you're over an enemy. And that's what we're going to do today. It's a fairly simple system. We're going to make it from, I'm going to drag this over here. I'm just going to do a quick overview. So we have a melee system which checks to see if you're aiming. You can't melee when you're aiming, but we're not setting up that, so we're not going to worry about it. We have a procedural kind of animation for the gun. As soon as the gun gets to a certain point, it will check to see if there's an enemy in front of you, and in which case it will lunge. I have it set up to only lunge on a plane, so you can't lunge like upward and do super jumps, but if you want that as a functionality, you can keep that in there. And then we also, this is the system that sets up the reticle to turn red. It's on tick, but we have it somewhat optimized to only update the reticle color whenever something has changed. It keeps checking to see if there's an enemy in front of you because you have to do that on tick, but the reticle only gets updated when something changes, and then we spawn in the HUD, of course, which also has the set reticle color there. And then the only thing with the enemy dummy here is that under the tags right here, we have it tagged as an enemy, and that's how we check to see what's an enemy and what's not, but it's just a cylinder with some collision. Okay. So right here we have our first person template. It's slightly cleaned up. I don't like how the lighting is set up in the default one. And then also we are going to disconnect the HUD. So we just have this basically. I also cleared out some of the VR stuff. But from that, we are going to start by making the crosshair for ourselves. So we are just going to call this HUD, and the crosshair itself is just going to be an image, which is right under common, or you can search for it right there. The size is going to be 9 by 9. We want this to be, the pivot point to be in the center, so alignment will be 0.5 for both of these. We're going to set it to the center, and then it's going to be right there. We do need to get it to actually show up, so we'll do that on begin play, and then create, and then widget right there. We need the controller, so get player controller, and then we can see our HUD right there. We want to create a reference to this, so I'm just going to call this HUD ref, like that, and then we are going to add it to the viewport. So if we press play, we should have a little crosshair now. While we're here though, we might as well set up the custom event, which is called set crosshair color, just like that. And then within that, we can label this crosshair get, and then set color and opacity, this one right here. And then we will do a select color. We are going to drag this boolean into our custom event, and then we are going to label it as enemy close question mark. And then we want it to be red if there is an enemy close, and white if there's not. This doesn't actually do anything yet. We have to call it, but we might as well set it up while we're setting up the HUD. Okay, so now let's set up the events to actually call that. But before, we are going to make just the dummy enemy. And all this is going to be, if you scroll down, there's a cylinder. We're going to make it a bit taller, and then we are going to go into class defaults. The tags are under actor, under this more, or you can just search tags at the top. And we're going to do this and just do enemy. So notice it's right there. And just to make sure we don't have any errors, I'm going to grab the node actor has tag, and I'm just going to paste in exactly what I typed as the tag right there, just so we can be sure that we're using the exact tag name, since it goes by name. So now that we've created the enemy, let's drag in a few. There they are. They have collision. Very good. I did also make the player a bit smaller. The camera's in a weird spot in the default one, so I kind of adjusted that. But other than that, okay, so now let's do on tick. Tick. And we are going to do a line trace. The melee range, channel, line trace by channel, is kind of up to you. I set it to 222 units. That seemed about right. I'm gonna grab the first person camera, get world location. That's where we want this to start. And then we want the forward vector. Then we multiply it by a float. And this is where I put in the 210 units. You can make that longer if you want. If you want the melee range to be longer, or you can even make it dynamic if you want like different melee ranges for different weapons and that sort of thing. But we're going to keep it fairly simple. We're going to add the vector plus the vector, since we're adding this forward vector to the location of the camera, which will give us a vector forward from the camera. We want to then break the hit results. You can also right click and break them, but that's okay. The thing we want is the hit actor, and we want to know, is it valid? This one right here, the little question mark, the macro. It's a built-in macro to Unreal. And then from here, this is also where we can check, hey, does it actually have that tag? To optimize this, we can do, actually, let's do this. If you hold control and get it, you can do a get, and then you can click it and do convert to validated get. So we want to make sure this is valid for both, and then we are going to make a variable which is from here, which will be the enemy close variable. So if this is valid, and assuming the HUD is still valid, we want to set crosshair, oops, not set crosshair, set crosshair Keller. That's our event. And then for this one, technically you can just leave this blank, but I want to set this to be no, there's no enemy close. And that can go into that. You don't have to connect that actually, but you might as well, since that's how you want it to register. And then make sure to connect that though. So this should work already. We're going to put in an optimization. So let's see, it's red when we're hovering over, and when we're too far away, or when we're not looking at an enemy, it's not. But it's setting this every single frame. So let's actually kind of help it out so it doesn't have to set it every frame. So we'll do a do once. We'll put a do once there and a do once there. But we don't want it to just do it once. We want it to keep working. So what we can do is hold down S and add in a sequence. And then for the second section of the sequence, it's like, okay, once this activates, have this reset so it can activate in case things change, and then the same for the other one. So now that we've done that, nothing should have changed, but it won't be calling to set the reticle color every single frame. Okay, so we have the reticle, we have the crosshair, or same difference. Now we just need the melee. So I'm just going to hard code this in with F. You probably, if you're doing this in an actual project, you're going to want to set up your input bindings, but I'm okay with doing it this way. We are going to do a do once, so you can't just spam the melee indefinitely. And then we are going to set up a timeline. And this will be, I'll call it melee blend. The timeline here, so let's open it up. We are going to want to float. The float we're just going to call alpha, since it's kind of the blend. Again, you can change the length of this to be whatever you want. 1.2 I'm pretty happy with. I'm just going to add a keyframe there, put this at 1.2, and we're going to add a keyframe here at 0, and then right around, let's see here, right around here, I think I want to add a keyframe, and I'm just going to move it up. And if you select all these and press 3, they will kind of go down like that. You can also right click and set whatever tangent you want. I'm pretty okay with this. Let's see, let's flatten them actually, see what we get. No, I like this better. I want it to go into it pretty quick. And then, okay, so once it finishes, we're going to need a sequence, and then we are also going to want to do something on update, which is set relative transform. On the mesh here, since this is the thing we're going to want to set. Actually, we're not. I'm going to do this. I'm going to create an empty, not an empty, what do they call it? A scene. I'm just going to put it in someplace a little bit more reasonable, since if you look at the gun arm down here, the pivot point is in a pretty awkward location. So I am going to kind of line it up. I'm going to turn off this, more like that. And I'm going to just call this gun handle. I'm going to make sure this is under the camera, which it is, and then I'm just going to drag the gun there. And this is going to be the thing we actually move around. Okay. Another thing, just to make our lives easier, I'm just going to add another scene here. I'm going to put it under the gun handle. I'm going to zero it out. I'm going to then put it under the first person, so these should be the same scene. And I'm going to put this under here. So what this means is this is now at 0. And that will make it just a bit easier as we're setting up this animation. I'll show you why. Okay, so we're going to want set relative, oh no, not reset, set transform. This one, set relative transform. And this will be on update. And then here we are going to lerp a transform. we're going to split both of these. And the alpha goes there. See, that's why it's called alpha. We're just going to move this up to give ourselves some space here. Okay. Now we need to figure out where would we want the gun to transform to, like what's a good melee position. So we are just going to kind of move this, see what that looks like. I'm kind of happy with that actually. So what we can do here, I'm just going to clean up these numbers a little bit since we're going to need to copy them. Okay. And then this one we can keep at 0 because remember we have this scene here. But then this one, for the location, we can just do make literal make vector. I'm going to do this. We're just going to multiply this by 1. And this will be these values here. So what is this? 32 minus 1. Actually, we don't need this. We'll just put it right in there. Minus 1, minus 1. And then the rotation was, not this one, 50. Oh, it didn't copy since it doesn't want that little percentage symbol there. Okay, so now that we have that, if we press F, we should engage this and see what happens. I don't think it will reset. Okay, so that worked. So now we can reset these. And this is where we can do the actual melee. My melee is on a bit of a delay. Your melee doesn't have to be though. I like to set my melee once this value is at a certain point. So this will activate the melee right about here. I guess we can do it sooner. So we can maybe activate it at, what was the value I gave it? Oh yeah. This we need to make sure has a value of 1. There we go. So we're going to activate the melee when it's at 0.8, so right about there. So not that much of a delay, but I think it kind of helps the lunge look better, because instead of lunging and then moving the arms, there's like a slight arm movement and then you lunge forward, which in my opinion gives a slightly better effect. So we're just going to put a branch there. So once this is at 0.8, we gave it a fairly large tolerance. We are going to do a do once. However, we want to be able to melee again later. So we're just going to, one of these sequences we put here on the finish, we're going to reset that. And the other one, we're just going to loop back around and have it reset that. Just like that. Okay. We are going to get the first person. We're going to get the forward. I'm going to split this since I only want the X and Y. So I'm going to do make vector. And we're just going to plug in the X and Y. We'll leave the Z separate since I don't want to melee upward. If you want to melee upward, don't do this. I'm going to then multiply this by a float. And this will be 2000. That works pretty well for me. And then we need a branch here. We're just going to do an additional check to see, hey, is the enemy still close? Or this will be the first enemy close. And then we want to launch the character if the enemy is close. You can always melee, but it only lunges forward if there's actually an enemy in front of you. So there you go. So when it's red, oh, it's not resetting correctly. Finish. I think I know what I did wrong. This needs to be play from start, like that. There we go. So when it's red, you lunge forward. When it's not, you just play the animation, but there's no lunge. You can technically, if it's red and then you move away before it happens, it won't lunge. But there's your melee system. It's fairly basic, but I think it's a nice effect. So y'all have fun.